everyone. I'm Saurabh back again in another episode of Freshly Pressed. This is a podcast where we feature indie creators from all over the world. Today we have with us Lee Newman, the creator of Sison. Am I saying it right?
Well, it's really up to interpretation. There's a in the first page there's a pronunciation, but part of the fun is that it's people say it like so many different ways. So
That's part of the fun in the entire book, isn't it? Yeah, cool. We'll start with a brief introduction about yourself. How about you introduce yourself to everyone?
oh sure. My name is Lee Newman, a comic writer, prose writer, webcomic writer, uh, bathroom stall limerick writer, all kinds of things. I've been writing since I was probably a kid, probably about 8 years old. I've always loved comic books. Sissone's the first time I've gotten something out there that's like 100% me, as far as my writing, my ideas. I got to help pick the team and everything, and it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's a caped comedy, very much like The Tick and stuff like that. So, and just like yourself, I'm a huge fan of pop culture. As you can see, it's surrounded by it here in my office. So,
Absolutely. That's amazing. This is my favorite question. What actually got you into comics in the first place?
like I said, I've always loved comic books. I think one of the earliest books I can remember reading was Amazing Spider-Man back in like the late '80s, early '90s. The first comic I ever collected was Sam Keith's The Max, and my dad used to actually take me around to comic shows. It was the first book I ever had where I had my little need it, got it list that I would keep in my wallet, so we knew exactly what single issues we were looking for. My dad even took me to a show that Sam Keith was at one time, which was super cool.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
a very like I grew up on those '80s, '90s books like that. So the very Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, all that kind of when comics was just blowing up. So those are the books that really kind of got me into reading stuff and wanting to write stuff.
Absolutely. I think 80s and 90s were a great time for comic books. Like
Oh, it was
late
great.
80s
It
and
was
early
amazing.
90s. Yeah. So many like talented artists, writers, they just flourished during that time as well, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite runs is I keep bringing this up, so I think everyone would be bored by now listening to this that I Jim Lee and Chris Claremont are one of my like that X-Men Uncanny X-Men run
I was
from
gonna
early
say that
90s.
is iconic. That fold out cover, man, like the triple cover. Oh, dude, like it's iconic. That's an iconic cover. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was literally the first thing my dad got me, and then like yeah, I haven't looked back since. I just love comic books after that. So
That's
yeah.
amazing. If there's a book it's like your gateway drug book, that's a great one, man. I remember when I was a kid collecting the Jim Lee X-Men trading cards. I actually have a hardbound book that's all of them. That's super cool. So it's like a little hardbound book with all those cards from the '90s in it. Yeah, if you're going to pick someone to draw X-Men, Jim Lee's great, and Chris Claremont's an incredible writer.
I totally agree. I don't know, like I have so much nostalgia around like Batman the animated series as well, where when I
Oh
was
yeah.
growing up, it was on air all the time. I think a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, they came up with a comic book version of Batman the animated series, and
The first appearance
uh,
of Harley Quinn was in the comic books, actually. I think. Yeah.
yes, yeah, so good. They're just amazing. One of the few times I actually like logged on to Comixology and bought everything there.
Yeah. Oh man, that's that. What a great site too. Like, I mean, was the hub for comics. I hope they can kind of pull it back together. But yeah, I've spent a lot of money on Comixology. So
Seriously, yeah. uh, I hope they pull it back together. I don't want it to die. Yeah. Uh, yeah, tell us a bit more about Sison and how did you come
sure,
up with the idea and what was your thought process around it?
sure. So actually, the story of Sasone is almost as interesting as the story of Sasone. Basically, it was a work for hire. My friend Brian Cole, who is a prolific comic creator, came to me because he thought I was a funny guy and I could write a funny book. And hopefully, if you read the book, you agree with him. But
Yeah.
I did the work for hire for him, and he kind of helped me put the team together. And I had a few people I'd already worked with, like Steve Cannon, who does colors on the book, had done colors for some art for a horror anthology that I wrote that was prose. So it was just like written word. It wasn't comics, but I had comic artists actually do some of the art for it. So Steven had done some of the art there, or some of the coloring there. So we put that together, and it was great. I loved it, and we're like, okay, we're going to do a Kickstarter. This was 4 years ago,
Yeah.
and everyone tried their best, everyone promoted it, everyone tried to get it out there. We just couldn't hit the benchmark to get it printed. So years go by, and I'm like, man, Brian and I were just like, God, Sassone, why didn't it work? Why didn't it happen? And so finally, I was like, listen, Brian, I have a question. Can I buy Sassone from you? And he gave me a figure, and I was like, okay, that seems fair. I mean, it's comics are so expensive to produce, and I thought his offer to buy it from him was very generous. So I actually fundraised the money to buy Sassone myself. So now I own Sassone.
Wow.
Um, but the way that we worked it out was it's sort of like a sandbox situation where he still does like novelization. So the novelization of it he produces, and we have a little kind of shared universe sandbox, just like the DC universe all takes place in the same place.
Yeah.
So he has other characters that exist within Grand City, which is our little sandbox. So Sassone's only one character in that sandbox, and we've got other creators who are making other comics that take place in there. And there are even some callbacks to in Sassone. There's some references to other characters. Like there's a character named Red Rooster who's his own comic,
Yeah.
but in the
Yeah.
first issue of Sassone, he talks about him. But anyway, so Brian maintains the rights to do novelizations and things like that, and then I'm doing the comic stuff. And we kept Brian on because he's a great editor and also a good letterer and just good. And he's very like utility belt comic creator. He can do a lot of things. So
Yeah.
he's still with us doing the editing and stuff like that and helping me do some of the story writing. But he pretty much just said, okay, take the comic and run with it, man. He goes, I think the last thing he said about it when we were doing the transaction, he goes, make me regret selling this to you. And I said, I'll do my best. So, um, so that's what we did to actually get to make Sassone. And then when I got it back, I was like, okay, well, let's repackage a little bit. Let's do a few new things. So I actually dropped down the price a little bit from where we had it just to kind of try and get it out there. I did some early bird deals. I added, I think, 4 extra pages of extras, like behind the scenes stuff, because
Yeah.
that's one thing I always like in comics is when they have some stuff in the back. It'll have like, like here it is in the pencils, here it is in the inks, here it's in the colors. Because part of what is cool to comics to me is the process to get to the
Yeah.
very end. So we've got a lot of production stuff in the back of the deluxe issue, and so we ran it. I set a pretty conservative goal. Definitely did not make back any of the money that I put into it, but we put all the money right back into the book. Printed some really awesome covers. We've got like an Amazing Spider-Man 33 and a couple other variant covers that are super cool. Incredible art team doing those covers. David Jackson, Shiro, who is she's also super versatile artist. I mean, she did the Amazing Spider-Man cover. She also did our foil Akira spoof cover. So
Ooh, that
just
was so
a lot
good.
of thank you. There's a lot of very talented people on this book. If I was ranking everybody who was awesome, I'd probably be close to the bottom there because I think everyone else is so talented. It's a pleasure to work with all these people. So that's kind of how it came about. Is Brian came to me and asked me to write a funny book, and I wrote a funny book, and we finally managed to get it made this year at the end of last year. So that was super cool and super great for me to actually see people be like, "Hey, your book's actually really good," and I was like, "That you sound
It
surprised,
is.
but thank you." So yeah, it's that's where it brings us to that today, and it's just kind of I love everyman tales. So like I'm a big fan of Spider-Man and stuff like that. The whole like it could be anybody. So that's the whole idea is Mark and
Yeah.
Sassone can be anybody. He's just some
Anybody.
schlub, just like me, just some schlub. So and that's the whole thing is that I like heroes that you can kind of identify with because they're not perfect. So that's the whole kind of thing, and we do that through humor and through him just kind of doing his best. And sometimes you don't always do the best, even if you're doing your best. And so that's the
Yeah.
whole idea behind him.
I don't know if that's the case, but I do see a bit of like kick-ass influence as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because obviously the book is incredibly funny. It is very well paced. I don't know. I just read through it in like 10 minutes. I don't know if it's good or bad, but I just loved every panel of it. It was just really good. It was just
Thank
really
you very much.
fast. Yeah,
I mean, if you can't put it down, that's a good sign, right? If you can just go right through it. So that's great.
yeah. I just
But yeah, there
started
is a
it
lot of Mark
and
Miller in that.
yeah, I could make out. And it's funny you said Red Rooster because like when I spotted Red Rooster in the book, I felt it was an Australian reference because Red Rooster is actually an Australian chicken chain, like Chick-fil-A. It's kind
Is
of
it?
like that.
That's
Yeah.
funny. That makes it even better.
I think your books will do pretty well in Australia. You can do a tie-in with Red Rooster.
Hashtag not sponsored, but open to it.
I know. Yeah, and it did seem like Grand City is a much bigger universe than just its own, and like there are obviously references to it. So, do you have other plans to like expand like other characters into comic books as well, along with your
Oh,
friend Brian?
absolutely. Yeah, we've got well, in addition to Sisona, obviously, Brian has a really cool character he does called the Rental, and the idea is he's just his costume's just a rental. So every time you see him, it's like a different stupid costume, just whatever he could get. So that's one of
That's
his
so
characters
funny.
that's in there. Red Rooster exists within that realm. I'm actually planning to reboot a book that I did called No Rest for the Wicked into Grand City, and it's a book that's about a bunch of like D-list, not even D, like F-list supervillains who have a roommate that's just a guy, and so we're going to try and reboot them into the whole Sasonaverse and bring some good ideas that I had now that we've kind of established some canon. Bring some stuff that I was like, well, I really like that, but we only got one issue out. Let me kind of tie it in and kind of soft reboot it back into this new shared universe that we all have, and then Brian can play with them, and the other people can put them in their books, and we can kind of like have a just put more toys in the toy box, basically.
Absolutely, and I think that would really work because it seems like the universe is quite rich and there's so
That's
many
yeah,
different
definitely.
possibilities. Sorry, go for it.
Oh, that's the whole idea is to just put as much in there that everyone can have fun with. Like nobody's, it's no, there's no, it's cooperation. Like nobody's trying to get rich off anybody else. Nobody's trying to out anybody or like outdo anyone. We all just want to make cool comics and have fun, and that's really what the whole anything I do is about. I'm not trying to get rich. I'm just trying to tell some cool stories. So if I'm doing that, I'm happy.
Absolutely, no, and that's what I love about indie comics, right? Like most of the indie comic creators are people who actually come with a lot of passion and stories they actually want to tell. So desperately that they actually go above and beyond to do things like Kickstarter. Kickstarter is one hell of a thing, and it's so hard to do, and it's incredibly like intensive in terms of how much effort you put in. So like crowdfunding is hard. So if
Oh
people
yeah,
are doing it for their comics, it means they're extremely passionate about it, and they want to
oh
make
yeah, I definitely
tell those
agree.
stories. So yeah,
It's true. Crowdfunding is exhausting. Anyone who puts out book after book after book, hats off, man. Like
totally.
I do one, I'm like I got to take a nap for like 6 months. It is a lot of work. I
Yeah.
mean, it's people don't sometimes don't realize it's more than just okay. I spun the top and now the money comes in. No, you got to be out there promoting. Got to be out there talking to other people, telling your friends, hey, share this thing, do this thing for me,
Yeah.
and then even if I have a campaign going, I feel the necessity if I see someone else that I support, I'm like, oh, they got a campaign too, so we'll share mine, but then we're going to share theirs too, and then share this one, and then share that one. So I think it's really important to I mean right, what did it say, a rising tide lifts all ships or whatever. I try and rise the tide with everybody. So I
Yeah.
have a campaign going right now, and even though if I see something, I know I have several friends that have stuff going, so I always try to just share that with everyone. So no matter like if I have a campaign or not, it's just if I see a worthwhile book, I want everyone to know about it. So you might not like my book, but check out this book.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm one of the contributors to the current campaign. I absolutely loved some of the variant covers
Oh, awesome.
in that. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I want to talk a bit about the story and the structure. I feel like
Sure.
what you've done is awesome because you have turned a lot of superhero cliches on its head. I think the whole
Hmm.
story is about turning it on its head. I absolutely love the villain of the story and
Oh,
how that
cool.
whole thing takes a turn. I don't want to spoil him for anyone,
Oh
but
yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah, but yeah. Do you want to get a bit into the story?
Yeah, so the whole idea is basically Mark is a superhero doing his best who he didn't get dealt the best hand as far as powers go. He fights crime with ballet because he has a super strong, indestructible feet, which sounds pretty lame, but I mean, like, he can kick real hard, so that's a good power. Um, but he's not he's not the fittest guy, he's not the fastest guy, but he's the guy who's doing the best that he can do. And so within the first couple pages, he's like, life is great. And then by the end of the first page, life isn't great because his girlfriend comes out of the gym or wherever she's coming out of, and she says his name out loud.
Yeah,
So that kind of spoils his whole super identity. And
yeah,
so from that point, his whole life kind of goes spiraling out of control. I mean, he still wants to be a superhero, but the whole secret identity was part of his shtick. So she kind of blew up his spot. And then obviously he's not the coolest hero. So she thinks it's pretty lame and ends up leaving him. And things just go downhill from there. So we kind of
yeah.
follow him on his descent into oblivion while he's still trying to kind of hold on to the pieces and put them back together.
Nice, nice. And I think it's bit of a I don't know, like I just absolutely love the characterization of Mark because he seems innocent enough and
Mhm.
he's kind of like an everyman who goes about doing his work and then uh and also does crime fighting and things like that. We have people like that on Neighborhood Watch all the time. People
Mhm.
who want to be who have those like who love comics and who want to be superheroes and stuff like that. So it's kind of like those people uh who are represented in the book as well. Have you come across
Mhm.
some of those kind of people as well in real life?
People who personally believe they are superheroes or would like to be. Maybe not with the capes and the crime fighting, but I think there definitely are people every day who are inspired by superheroes and things like that. Um, but yeah, I just one of the you hit on one of the things that I think is really important, at least in my writing, is I find flawed characters more interesting. So that's one of the things. Like even in the first couple pages of the book, he's trying his best, he's fighting crime, he's doing everything, but like this old lady gets in his way. He's like, "Hey, lady, I'm trying to do a thing." And he's like, but then he catches himself, and which is the important part. Like, it's
Yeah,
okay to step, it's okay to falter, but like, it's the nuance in that. He's like, I messed up. Oh, I messed up. I'm really sorry. I'm just trying to do my best. Because that's
yeah,
everybody, like everybody
yeah.
kind of loses their cool. Everybody kind of makes mistakes, but he puts it back in line and tries to put it back together. So it's a big message in a lot of my books. Is like just kind of I know this seems without being preachy, but like self acceptance and being okay with who you are and trying to be the best you is really kind of what that book is about.
Absolutely. That's such a good message as well. And I think that makes the character all the more relatable. Even how the villain takes a turn, I think that made the
Hmm.
character all the more hilarious and also very, very kind of like very relatable as well. So like yeah, hats off to you. Great work.
Thank you. I'm a big believer that every person is shades of gray. I don't think that anyone is just one way or another way. This the good guy and bad guy. I feel like that, and Marvel's done a lot of that with their movies lately too, is like with redemption arcs and things like that. I feel like every character has shades of gray. As cool as Boy Scout Captain America and Boy Scout Superman are, I feel like, Superman flawed, not necessarily like when he loses his powers in the Richard Pryor movie, but like,
Yeah.
in some cases, flawed heroes I just find more interesting because what fun are you if nothing can stop you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But some of the comics are fun to read, like just the comics. The old ones are fun to read
Mhm.
when heroes seem like some of the, every comic has its appeal. So yeah, this has its place and very important one. Um, yeah, one of the other favorite questions of mine is what kind of what are like your top five pop culture influences?
Oh
Anywhere
man. Okay.
between comics to movies. If they're more than five, that's fine too. But
Well,
what are
let's
your
see.
top
I'm trying
five?
to think. Let me think. What influences me now? I love horror. I write a lot of comedy, but I do really like horror. I really like Lovecraftian horror, like really stuff like The Thing, like John Carpenter's The Thing. Really great flick. Um, but like it's so weird, like so many different things I like because I like horror, but I like comedy as much as I like horror. I mean, like Judd Apatow movies, a lot of that comes through in Sasson. There's a lot of that kind of bridesmaids, knocked up kind of humor in my books. And I'm video games. I play a lot of video games, so it's always fun. Um, and music, man, music is definitely a big influence. It's you'll hear songs and lyrics and things like that. And you're like, oh,
Mm,
that'd make a really good comic book. So I mean, it's you can find inspiration anywhere, but I feel like mainly music and movies is where I get a lot of ideas.
Nice, nice. Funny you said the thing. Actually, like I was watching this movie last night, Annihilation. Have you seen it?
Yes, actually, oh my gosh, I was just watching a video explaining because that's such a complex film. I was just watching a video explaining kind of like the nuance and some of like the subtext in it. Yeah, that's a very good movie. It definitely bears rewatching too.
Absolutely. And I think some of the practical effects they've done in that movie, especially, that guy splattered on the wall
Hmm.
with the cancers thing coming out of him, and taking out
Yeah,
his
there's some
guts and
very
everything.
disturbing imagery in that film.
I know. Those things actually reminded me of The Thing, because like The
Hmm.
Thing had a similar concept, like it would
Hmm.
the alien being coming on Earth and then taking over a particular area, and then it mutates, and it takes shape. It's a shapeshifter kind of thing. So yeah, uh kind of reminded me of The Thing as well, in a way. So yeah,
Yeah, I can definitely
Annihilation
see
was a
that
beautiful
parallel.
movie. Yeah.
It is. It very visually appealing too. Like it's like one of the prettiest horror movies. I think I could say it's like a very beautiful horror movie. But yeah, that's very like that's like the whole Lovecraftian aspect is like some of the scariest stuff is the stuff that doesn't care because it doesn't care. The thing doesn't care. It's just doing the thing it does. Pun or whatever connection not really intended, but yeah, the thing's just being the thing, just like Annihilation. Like stuff's just happening. And the
Yeah.
scariest stuff is the stuff that doesn't have a reason because as human beings, we're like, well, there has to be a reason this terrible thing's happening. No, terrible stuff's just happening. So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And like and stuff that's not even visible, right? Like you don't know what shape or form it could take, or it would just come and affect your cells. I mean, that's scary.
yeah.
Like you could just be walking, and then this thing takes over you. That's, yeah, incredibly
No, I
scary.
think part of what makes that scary too is like in real life, bad stuff just happens. It doesn't matter, it just happens. So like even though like those are so fantastic movies, like and so like out there concepts, but bad stuff just happens. So that's I
Yeah,
think on some level as humans we connect to like just bad stuff just happens. So that could just happen.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe
I
not space
totally.
asteroid taking over things and changing their genetics, but like, bad stuff could happen. Who knows? Now it'll happen.
Coronavirus.
It's 2023. Nothing surprises me anymore.
No, exactly, exactly. Like last 3 years of COVID, right? It changed everything for us. Yeah, cool. That was great. Yeah. Next thing I would want to ask you is, what kind of characters attract you?
Well, I think I covered a little bit like the everyman stuff. I really like. I like stuff with a touch of humor too. One thing I've been rereading lately is well, two things actually, kind of in the same vein. Skull Kickers by Jim Zub is one of my favorite kind of fantasy comedy books, and then Rat Queens also is a very good like high fantasy, and they both have a bit of like a touch of anachronism in them. So like they're almost kind of pop culturally aware, so those are
Yep.
both really good books. But I've been watching a lot of Vox Machina lately. I don't know if you're familiar with that on Amazon, but it's
Oh, I love it.
excellent show.
Yeah.
So I kind of what I'm into reading usually kind of changes depending on what I'm watching. So since I've been watching Vox Machina, I've been really kind of drawn to more fantasy stuff and pulling those things back off the shelves. Um, but yeah, like if I'm watching scary stuff at the time, then I'll be like, oh, let me dig my horror books back out, or stuff like that. Also, just there's a ton of great indie out right now. Um, I'm trying to think like Slowpokes, which is a book about killer sloths. That's super good. Trying to think what else. Deathless by my friends over at the We Have Issues podcast. That's super good.
Yeah. Nice.
Um, Final Boy. That's another one that's about well, the final boy, just like you have final girls in horror movies. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot of great indie out there right now too, and a lot of really good campaigns going as well. So yeah, I really feel like lately a lot of my reading has turned more towards indie stuff, just because that's who I'm talking to, and I also try
Yep.
and do once or twice a week I'll do like a comic feature, and if I can I'll try and make it indie. So I kind of reach out to my friends. I'm like, hey, are you doing a book right now, or do you have something you'd like me to promote? So
Yeah.
I'll reach out and find stuff. Oh, Path of the Pale Rider. That's a really good one. It's like a
Okay.
Western meets Walking Dead. It's actually about to fund its third issue right now, I think. Path of the Pale
Wow.
Rider is a really good one.
Cool. There was one I was reading yesterday. It was sent by another indie creator. It's called Gatorman Kills. I
I don't
don't know
think I've
if you.
heard of that one.
Yeah, it's really good. You must check it out.
I'm going to as soon as we get off here. You can send me a link. I definitely
I will
I
do
can
that.
never get enough indie comics.
Yeah, I will do that. Yeah, there's so many good ones out there. Like I have been obviously I do some reviews as well, so I get
Mhm.
sent a lot of preview copies of comic books, as well as I push a lot of Kickstarter fund buttons nowadays. Like I have almost stopped going to a comic book shop and just buying comics, which is a shame because I just order stuff
I'm
online.
I get it
Yeah,
though. I get it though. And you know, it's so easy to just kind of hit the button and like get something. And plus, I don't there's some kind of weird like addiction to like crowdfunding projects because it's like I always try and set myself a budget. I'm like, I'm just gonna get this book. But then it's like, but don't you want this book here? And so, okay, well, just these two books. And then I'm like, oh, where'd my money all go? It's pretty sweet when the stuff starts showing up though. So it's like a little surprises. But yeah, I mean, it's especially with independent books, it's just it's really cool to see what other people are doing. I actually the other day I tweeted that like it feels like independent comics is like the 90s music scene in Seattle where it's like you're just like, oh my gosh, you know, here's Pearl Jam, here's Nirvana, here's all these people that deserve to be so famous. And like some
yeah,
of them like Pearl Jam and Nirvana do get famous, but then there's all these other indie bands or creators who are just as talented. It's a crazy pool of talent out there. If everyone could make their comics and get famous and rich and make all the money they want to do, I wish that they could because there's a new creator every day that I meet that's making a book. I'm like, man, why don't you work for like the big two or why isn't your independent title huge? Because it's so good.
I know exactly. And I think some people have even like criticized a lot of like people like me, saying that, oh, you praise indie comics all the time, but I'm like, they are so good. It's every time I read something, I get something fresh. I get a fresh perspective.
Hmm.
It's not something that I've read before. A lot of times it's actually quite an original story, an original concept. People have like artists have poured their heart out into it most of the time, and it shows.
Hmm.
So like I even if there are minor flaws in book, I'm actually quite willing to let them go and just roll with it and enjoy
Hmm.
some of the original content that I'm getting rather than just pissing on it. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. I love legacy heroes. And don't get me wrong, like I talk about indie a lot, but I adore Big Two. I mean, I grew up on Marvel. I grew up as a Marvel kid. Spider-Man was one of my biggest heroes and still is one of my favorite characters to read. And you know, it's I don't have any problem with the big box comic companies. It's just, you know, it's sometimes you like you said, you get something a little bit different when it's just one person with no outside interference, just making the thing that's they've got up here. You know, so it's they can go, you know, any direction they want because there's no one going, I don't know if that's going to sell copies, you know. So I
Yeah.
mean, I love that. I love the freedom that independent comics brings people. I think that's why you get such unique stories in that situation.
Exactly. And I think that it also brings together a lot of stories that are not in mainstream
Hmm.
comic books, for example, and very authentic ones. For example, there's so many LGBTQ
Hmm.
writers and creators and artists who bring their own their own point of view and the worldview and the way they see things. It must be very different to like maybe a straight person writing an LGBT character. So as well as to some people with neurodiversity, people who are like I interviewed an African American person who said a lot of times mainstream comic books don't represent African American fathers in the right way.
Hmm.
And he was really passionate about doing that. So like it adds a layer of authenticity to your stories.
I agree. As a straight white guy that writes cape books, there is a beautiful honesty and authenticity and sincerity when I read a book by someone who's writing about, you know, their particular experiences in a way that I never could.
Yeah.
So I love to read different stuff, and I'm always asking people, what should I be reading? What's stuff that's not in my lane? What's stuff that's out here that's going to challenge me? That's going to give me new things to read and diverse things to read. And I love books like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. Yeah. There's also like so many like fun different kind of like references I see. Like somebody mixed a lot of like Star Wars and Star Trek, and like you could see influences from both these places. And then they came up with like a completely new setting with like mix
Hmm.
of fantasy and science fiction, and a lot of different kinds of concepts. So yeah, I don't know. I love genre blending as well. So so like yeah. Do you like comic books that blend a lot of different kinds of genres?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, well, for example, like Weird West is something I'm really digging right now, and that's one of the reasons why I like books like Path of the Pale Rider, because it's horror, but it's also Western, or like books that do this like sci-fi and Western, or any kind of like. I love when you smash things together that don't seem like they'll work,
Yeah,
because that's where you get like the most unique ideas. Because there are roads that have been tread, and they've been tread a lot because they're good. Like, I mean, obviously I love Kate books, and that's why I write one. I love horror books that are just straight horror, and that's why I write that stuff. But to
yeah,
put like this genre with this genre and just kind of make something new, it's great. It's incredible.
yeah. That reminded me, you said Western and horror. Like there's a movie called Bone Tomahawk. I don't know if you have seen
You are going to send me so many links when we're done.
that.
I want to know everything. I have not, but you've already piqued my interest.
Cool. Awesome. Uh, Great. I'll give you the floor for 5 minutes for your campaign if you want to just
Sure.
talk about it, and and just tell people about it. Just take it away.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you very much. So, what we're doing right now is we're doing a very limited uh, cover with Crowdfunder, and that cover is to benefit the LGBTQ community. We're giving a portion of all the applicable covers, so it's basically, we're calling it cheesecake for charity. So it's a little bit of a cheeky cover, but the book itself is PG-13. So if you didn't want the cheeky cover, you can pick up one of the other covers. But we're doing a very limited cover for that, and we're giving away a portion of every applicable purchase to the Trevor Project, which is an LGBTQ plus crisis line. So I think that's a very important cause, especially with the way things are now, a way that you can give a little bit to the LGBTQ community and also get yourself a comic out of it. And we've got that cover, and then I have a super limited number of our legacy covers from the first Kickstarter, because I don't normally reprint, and if I do reprint, there will be slight variations. So this is a last opportunity to get the full deluxe version of these alternate covers, and we have the one I mentioned, the Amazing Spider-Man, the foil cover. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like to make decisions, we have the whole package, everything. So you just make one pledge and you get all the stuff, and you don't have to worry about it. But yeah, we've got that, and I also have, if you're not in the U.S., because we're just shipping to the U.S., we actually have digitals at a discounted price as well. It's only, I think I've got it down to $2 for a digital copy of the book, and normally it's $4.99 over at Global Comics. But shout out to Global Comics, another amazing comic website. So basically, this is the cheapest you're going to get some of the stuff. We've got the books discounted down to like $5 a piece if you can catch those. But the limited covers are very limited. We've got, I think, 25 each of the charity covers, and then like single digits for the other ones. So like 3 to 5 of all the other promotional covers that we have, and just some really amazing art on there. And also, we're going for a good cause. Um, and I just, I wanted to do kind of a fun and cheeky cover to poke fun at the fact that a lot of indie books usually have like a kind of naughty lady cover, and I was like, well, my guy can be naughty too. So we made that, but I didn't want to just make a cheeky cover for no reason. So I was like, what's a good cause we can put it behind? And
Mhm.
so that's why we hooked up with the Trevor Project to give a portion of that. And I would like to say that even if we don't fund completely, I will still be taking into account how the amount of money that we're going to give to the Trevor Project, and I'm just going to give that out of my pocket if that's what we have to do, because I think it's a very important cause. And I'll work with the people donating if we don't manage to make goal to ask, would you like a portion of yours to go through to it, or would you like the full amount to go through to it? I mean, ideally, I'd like us to fund and be able to give a huge donation. but it's important enough to me that I'd like to, no matter what, I would like somebody to go to the Trevor Project. And I'd also like to say that even if you look at my comic and you're like, this is silly, this is dumb, I don't like it, there's a direct donation button at the very bottom. So you can just donate directly to the Trevor Project, because that's what it's about. It's not just about my comic, it's really about the cause.
That's so awesome. I'm going to promote your book for next 2 weeks for sure,
I
because
appreciate it.
because there's Pride Month going on in Sydney. There's Mardi Gras happening right now. For next 2 weeks, there's a big
That's
Mardi Gras
awesome. I had no
festival.
idea that you guys had a different Pride Month than ours. So cool.
I think there's a lot of different cities, like all different cities have their own Pride Month. So in
Hmm.
Sydney, it's this month, and New Zealand has its next month. So like Auckland and Wellington have like between February and March, but it's roughly around the same time. So it's between
Gotcha.
February to April. Yeah.
So even more applicable at your location then for this particular cause.
That's awesome. It's for a great cause. Please come out and fund this campaign. I'll link to your campaign everywhere on the video and on Twitter and Instagram as well. All
I
the
really
best for it.
appreciate that. Thank you. And a very conservative goal too. We're just shooting for $400. That's all we need to print. We're already over halfway there. So I think we've got like a
Awesome.
205. We've got over 200. So more than halfway there. And then funding means, that guaranteed that money is going from your pocket to the Trevor Foundation. But I mean, if I do have to go to the Trevor Project with my own money, I have no problem doing that either. We'll just, I'll just settle up with the donors. We'll figure out how much of theirs is going to go, and I'll send some as well. So
That's awesome. That's great. Let's do it. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Lee. I really appreciate you coming out today.
thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun just kind of talking pop culture and stuff like that too. So
Awesome. Great to have you here. See ya.
see you later.